Now we have Vince Russo, the head writer of World Championship Wrestling, and the Power That Be, the head of the Powers That Be. How you doing, Vince?
All right, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on and everything. What's your feelings now that you've been writing the show for 6 weeks or so and been in there? What do you think are the pluses and the minuses and what needs to be worked on the most as far as the WCW product?
Well, I think there are pluses and minuses. To be honest with you, I think the pluses are there's been no problems whatsoever working with the talent. Some of the talents who I thought might be a little leery of our system have really turned out to be the best students, which is really surprised me. And I think if you're watching the product, you probably know who I'm talking about. One of the problems we have, though, is, I'm a very impatient guy, and to be honest with you, I want to turn around the ratings yesterday. But we're in a situation now where, the players need to be put in place, and storylines need to develop in order for us to get where we're going. And really, that's been happening since day one, around Starrcade. It will take another huge step to where we want to go. And, eventually in about 2 or 3 months, everything should be into place. I think there's great room for improvement when it comes to the production end, and I think a lot of that has to do with, too, just the production at WCW just isn't used to the fast pace of, the New York way, so to speak. Before we came, they had wrestling matches that went, 2 segments. Sometimes they went 3 segments. Now it's basically Crash TV, where it's a pre-tape to a live interview to a match. And, production-wise, they're really adapting to our system. So I think we have, a great way to come when it comes to that. But, I'm happy. I've only written 7 shows. It hasn't even been 2 months there. There has been a difference in the ratings, and I'm about where I expected to be at this point.
As far as just where the stories were about where you expected them, or did you expect...
No, absolutely, because, as I said, you notice we put some players on the shelf in order to bring them back at the appropriate time in the appropriate role, and, things are starting to flush themselves out. And again, that's why I said at the beginning, it was going to really take a good 6 months before you saw a difference, because, first of all, you needed to stop the bleeding, and then second of all, you just needed to really get the players in place.
Now, one of the things that I think has been lacking is a certain continuity between what's on TV and building up pay-per-views and even more house shows. When I hear that you're doing these house shows with Bret Hart in the main events, or defending the title against Ric Flair, it doesn't fit with television because Ric Flair is never mentioned on television, and and there's no program between the two of them, and maybe it may very well be a hell of a house show match. But it's like, if that's what's, to me, it's like, if that's what's going to be at the house shows in the main events, then Ric Flair should be on television doing an angle with Bret Hart.
I agree with that, Dave, but that was something that was really booked a long time ago. And, as you know, WCW, they really dug themselves in a hole when it came to house shows. There was a history of, changing the players at the last minute, and, they killed a lot of houses in a lot of towns. And I got to be honest, I'm starting to see that myself as I go town to town, and I'm not seeing a big crowd. And then, either a Mike Graham or an Arn or a Kevin, they're explaining to me, well, what happened the last time a house show was in this town. So, we were in a situation where we wanted to tell a story with Flair. He was already booked in some house shows. So rather than, pull him off those house shows and, put the screws to the people once again who might have already paid money, we just decided to, let's fulfill our obligations, let Flair work the house shows, because again, enough damage has been done in the past. So that was really a point of just trying to fix prior commitments.
Now, what's your reaction? The WWF has had a tremendous media problem this week with many major sponsors pulling out due to the type of product that had been presented. And in fact, you were probably a big proponent of going in that direction. And last night's show was the first time that they really did tone the show down. I don't know if it's going to be a long-term thing or just until the heat blows over. And I think it just depends on the media and the sponsors' reaction. I don't think anyone knows really where this one's going. But what's your reaction to that, and knowing that if it had worked, if someone did that to WWF and was able to get whatever it was, 8, 9 sponsors, like within a week or two to leave, that perhaps the same thing could happen to WCW if it got just slightly more raunchy, because it's, I know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, yeah, I got a couple of things to say about that, and I'm glad you brought that up. Number one, I have to believe, only because I was at the WWF for so long and I was really in the thick of a lot of things, the reality of the situation was WWF had sponsors lined up ready to do business with us. I mean, there really weren't enough holes to fill, so a lot of people were put on a waiting list. See, the thing is, to be honest with you, really when it comes to sponsors, if you're doing the number, if you're doing the demos that they're looking for, they tend to turn the other cheek. Now, with the WWF, there was always heat with the sponsors. I mean, that's nothing new. I really have to believe it's a little different case now. I don't think the heat was really sponsors dropping the WWF because, again, there were other sponsors waiting in line that would be glad to pay their money. I think the heat comes with now, Vince and the WWF being a public company. Now you have to answer to stockholders, and that's a totally different ball game. So I think that had a lot more to do with toning down the show and bringing the rating down than actually, the sponsors did. But, and again, I'm saying this to be honest with you. I'm not taking any shots at the WWF. I don't have any reason to do. They do their thing, and I do my thing here. But the reality of the situation is, there was such a limited roster at the WWF. There were only so many guys that we had. And I'll tell you now, a huge problem that WWF had, and probably their biggest problem that will be their downfall, in my opinion, is their talent relations department. It's a very weak department. And even before the SmackDown show started, I was on my soapbox telling Vince, Vince, you can't have another show and not add any talent to the roster. Well, talent wasn't added to the roster. So we were eating up talent and storylines very quickly because we only had so many players. So it got to the point where when we were writing the television, we had to write shock TV in order to keep people interested in the storylines and in the angles, because we didn't have the fresh faces where we could start new angles. And that's really the difference in WCW, that there's so much talent here and so many faces and people that we haven't even developed yet, that the storylines are endless. So there really isn't a need to, have shocking TV and push the envelope to keep the viewers, because there's a great amount of talent. And that's why I'm not concerned about that at all, because, again, we had to go where we went in the WWF at a necessity. We don't have to do the same thing in WCW.
We're going to start with Mike in Pennsylvania. Mike, how's it going?
All right. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing pretty good.
Okay, my question for Vince is, it's been well documented on the internet that you have little interest in Japanese and Mexican wrestling. I was wondering, since WCW has a lot of great international talent, if you're willing to utilize them better and sort of learn the styles, we can see guys like Psychosis, Laparca, Kaz Hayashi.
That's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because see, one of the problems that I personally always had with the luchadors and also the Japanese wrestlers is, especially wrestling in 1999, a big part of the formula to make somebody successful is really the personality. Rock is the Rock because of his personality. Yeah, he backs it up in the ring, and when the bell rings, he goes. But it was his personality that got him over. And I always felt that, with the luchadors and with the Japanese wrestlers, yes, they're great workers. I agree. But the other side of that is they need to have the personality to really become stars in the United States anyway. And, you know, the fact that they most of them can't speak English is a hindrance to them, and it's very difficult for them to relate with American fans and vice versa. However, the more I'm around the talent, you know, at WCW, you know, we've kept everybody around, you know, Psychosis, Hoovy, and Kaz. The more I'm around these individuals, the more I can see personality, and I can learn them and get to know them and see how to develop them. So as I become more familiar with them and I can see what their strengths are when it comes to personalities, I think you're going to see them play a bigger role in the product, you know, once we both are on the same page, basically.
One thing I want to say is ECW has used a lot of these guys and gotten, and I'm not saying that any of them can be the main event on a pay-per-view, and I'm not sure that they can. There are limitations of size, and there are limitations of not knowing the language. But I saw, like, you know, when Psychosis was in ECW, I mean, he had tremendous matches that were over like crazy to the fans, and even today with Super Crazy and Yoshihiro Tajiri, they're not guys that Paul can headline a pay-per-view with, but they're guys when they're on the pay-per-view that pull their weight and then some, you know, probably more than the vast majority of wrestlers in both WWF and WCW. So I think there's an effective use for them. You have to give them personality, but I just think that, like, even the ones who can't speak English, I think there's ways around it. But the announcers have to do a hell of a job selling them, and that's the one thing that I think the WCW announcers, by and large, have been very weak at when they're out there, like the Mexicans or something, out there having a good match. The announcers are out there joking about the match, and then it basically makes the audience think, well, these guys are unimportant guys bouncing around the ring rather than these guys are having a great match and they're top talent.
Right, and you know, and I agree with that, Dave, and they can have great matches, and they do. It's just, you know, the way I write television anyway, I just don't like to really put cold matches out in the ring because these two guys are going to have a hell of a match. I like more of the combination of these two guys are going to have a hell of a match, but they also have they also have a story to tell. And again, that's with me just getting to know them personally better, and I think we'll see more of that in the future.
There's one thing that I want to ask. What's the deal with what happened with Liger on Monday? Because that just seemed really weird. The whole Liger Juventud Guerrera match and no belt, and you know, what was the deal with Liger coming, and you know, was it his decision to come, and was he supposed to drop the title? I mean, was it, you know, how did that all go down?
Well, yeah, quite frankly, the commitment was made for him to come before I came here, which that's cool. I have no problem with. But again, I was told, well, he's coming on these dates. We're going to have him for 2 nitros, and in those 2 nitros, we'd like to have him lose the belt and win it back. So, you know, basically, I was given these instructions because, as I said, it was a prior commitment, and you know, so we were, you know, just try to again tell a story in 2 weeks. As far as the belt is concerned, to this day, I don't know where the belt was. So, you know, that's a good question that I'm going to have to find out myself on Monday.
Now, what's the deal now? I mean, if the thing was for him to come in, you know, and drop it and then bring it back, then the guy he lost to has a broken arm. Or do you know what exactly the injuries are that Juventud has?
Yeah, he broke his arm.
Yeah, so the guy's got a broken arm. Then do you know how they're going to handle it, or do you?
He's going to, you know, again, story-wise, you know, on Nitro, the story will make sense. And actually, you know, Psychosis will wind up defending the belt for Hoovy against Liger.
Okay. Now, are you bringing the Varsity Club back?
There's been a lot of talk about that, and it looks like we probably are.
Okay. Let's get.
But again, it's not going to be the same. You know, let me put it to you this way: the faces will be the same. But obviously, over the years, the Varsity Club would have had to change a little bit to keep up with the times. Okay. So it will be the Varsity Club that we knew, but it will be a 2000 version.
Okay. Let's see now. Let's go to Rob in Florida. Rob.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing really good. What's going on?
Okay, here it is. Vince, good job on the show. I mean, obviously, the improvement was just noticeable right from the get-go. I've noticed already the WWF's repeating themselves quite a bit. It's getting a little bit stale, you know? But that's just they just lost quite a few people, at least in the key positions, I believe. I wanted to get right to the thing that's kind of on my mind here. You see Flair. Ric Flair is like, well, he's Ric Flair. And I'm reading that you're going to, at least the direction he's going to go, he's going to be a commissioner, which he's not happy about. He's not on TV whatsoever. I don't know, you were saying how you thought a lot of the guys would go for your style. I don't know if he didn't, and maybe there's some resistance thing there. But I would have to, in fact, I know Ric Flair would be much, I mean, God, you'd have to think he'd have to be much better as a wrestler, cutting promos. I mean, when WCW was at its worst, he was the only thing that had a ratings jump when he was on the cutting promos. I mean, he's one of the best in the business even right now. I mean, do you believe that Ric Flair still has use for the company and as a wrestler, or not?
Yeah, there's no question about it. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons Ric Flair is on hiatus, and one of the reasons why we told the story we did, was because, you know, Ric Flair was in the middle of everything just like every other wrestler. Mm-hmm. And he really had nothing going on.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about Ric Flair that you do. I wouldn't be talking to you right now if it wasn't for Ric Flair. So, yeah. What we did was, again, and it's a thing that we realized was going to hurt us in the ratings. Mm. But what we had to do was we had to shelf, Ric for a while so we could tell, the story that we want to tell and bring Rick back in a spot where he is going to be in the spotlight and he is going to be in a role that is going to mean something other than just put him out there to wrestle a match every Monday night. So, everything was done, and like I said, we even hurt the company, and, quite frankly, my salary, because I get paid based on ratings, mm-hmm. by not having Flair on TV. But, Ric Flair is worth something more than to just make him wrestle every week to draw a rating. We just wanted to put the spotlight on him, and, you'll be seeing Flair back in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Now, I was curious about another thing, too, since I don't know if it was Bill Bush that was the one that was instrumental in really getting you over, but Terry Terrell also. There's two people that I think that are totally gone unnoticed by WCW that they should really try and bring in, and that's whoever directs the show, The Raw is War, because the show is just very well directed. And the guy that does the music for the WWF, too. Well,
the thing is, let me just stop you right there, because I agree with you. There's no question about that. WWF's production is far and beyond the best. There are guys there that have been there for years, and they do tremendous jobs. I would give anything to have them here. But the reality of the situation is once everybody signed non-compete clauses, well, that was really the end of anybody else coming over, because the last thing WCW wants to do is be tied up in court with lawsuits. Mm-hmm. So whereas I would love to see that happen myself, unfortunately, it's not going to.
Okay. I don't know how much more time Dave's going to let me have here.
Just go make one real quick question, okay?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, basically, I was also, too, the Oklahoma skit that was brought in, funny, but, taste is, of course, taste and wrestling don't really go together anyway, but it really, I think, showed me, more than anything else, just how stale, and I'm not trying to get anybody fired or anything, but I'm just saying that just how boring Tony and Bobby are compared to Jim and Jerry. And I was wondering if you ever thought about Joey Styles, Wes Thatcher. He's got a great voice in Ohio. Or even Scott Hudson from Thunder. I mean, it really would make a big difference, I think, in the energy level of the show.
Well, I think Joey Styles is excellent. I was always a fan of his, and I think Scott Hudson is good as well. Is good as well. But again, the way I look at it is we came in with a completely new system.
Yeah.
We basically changed the business around, the way they were doing business at WCW. So now Bobby and Tony are being put out there on a weekly basis, and they have a product in front of them that is brand new to them. So I much rather work with them, bring them along, and again, it takes time for them to get used to the system. But I think Tony and Bobby can, and I believe they will. And again, it's just a matter of them getting used to me and me getting used to them.
Let's go to Wes in Virginia first. Wes, what's happening?
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going really good.
Vince, I wanted to ask you about the time change with WCW Nitro going from 8 to 10. Seems like the biggest pro was that you need an unopposed hour to go against Raw, but with Thunder moving to Wednesdays and going from 9 to 11, you can do some more risque angles and also have 2 unopposed hours, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, keep in mind, and this actually happened before the controversy surrounding the WWF. On Wednesday nights when we go to Thunder from 9 to 11, the rating is going to be TV PG because of our West Coast feed. It's on earlier. So it's going to be TV PG. So as far as risque goes, it'll probably be more toned down than Nitro. As far as 8 to 10, I got to be honest with you, I hate that. I hate the thought of, it's great that we're unopposed from 8 to 9, but then from 10 to 11, you are turning over the entire audience to Raw. And
they're going to get 7 ratings in that second hour every week.
If they don't do an 8, I think something will be wrong. And the thought of that just kind of gives me a knot in my stomach. But again, that's a programming decision. That's a Brad Siegel, TNT programming decision. Everybody at WCW has told them that we want to go 9 to 11. We want to go head to head. But the problem is they don't have a program to put on from 8 to 9. They think they'd be more successful putting on a certain program from 10 to 11. It's not a closed door yet at this point because, like I said, everybody at WCW wants 9 to 11, and we're still fighting for that.
Now, when does that start, as far as the 2-hour Nitro?
That from what I'm told, that's supposed to start the first week in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead, Wes. Okay, sorry. We're going to go to Carlos. Carlos in New York, you're up next.
Hey, Vince, it's Carlos from New York.
Hey, Carlos, how you doing?
Back from the Resi days.
Yeah, how you doing?
I used to call your office and just give you all my opinions of Italian sport. Basically, I'm just calling to congratulate you and good luck with your WCW. You've been doing very well. My only problem is the Mexicans. I feel like you can utilize them better, but other than that, they've been doing well. Congratulations.
Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate that. And, again, as I said, whoever is on the WCW roster is going to be utilized.
Right. All right, bro. That's the basic reason. I haven't spoken to you in a while. I just wanted to congratulate you.
Yeah, I'm glad you called. Thanks a lot.
All right, man. Be careful. Bye-bye.
Okay, I don't know exactly if you would want to go into detail on this question, but one thing that I really have not liked about the show, and that is a lot of the segments have involved people that I think are, they come off very, very amateurish, and in particular, I would say the stuff Monday, as far as the Nitro Girl segments on Monday, and even like when the guy in the Misfits was in the ring. You're just watching this and you're just going like, oh my God. This is just this is worse than the worst independent, stuff, and worse than, public access television. There's parts of the show that are well scripted, and some of the guys have adapted to the acting very well. I think the Duggan stuff is very funny. I kind of question where it goes. Well, that's something different, but I think it's funny. But I think the Nitro Girl stuff is it's just so bad to me.
Well, see, again, Dave, and I'm not going to argue, the point of some stuff is good and some stuff isn't as good as it can be. But, again, you've got to understand, you're faced with a position where you're coming into a company and it's like, okay, here's your roster. These are the people under contract. These are the people that we're paying. So you have to literally take everybody, I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about the people that are being paid and, not really characters haven't really been defined. You have to take these people and you have to give them a role and give them the opportunity to justify what you're paying with them. And, I really believe in giving everybody the opportunity and giving them the ball and putting them out there and see what happens. And, the reality of the situation is some people are going to make it and some people aren't. And, just taking over that's a process right now that, you know, we're starting to see, well, what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the Nitro girls, particularly when they're actually in the ring, it's just like, you know, I know that some of the segments in WWF with Sable especially did incredible numbers, but I think that part of the lure of that was the costuming and, you know, the way that what they were doing was very simple, but they did it, whereas when I've seen the Nitro girls out there, and I don't know if this is standards and practices, but the costuming is such that the people aren't really seeing it as TNA, they're just seeing it as you know, really bad stuff. I mean, I've heard the people boo a lot of those segments.
Yeah, and again, there's no argument on this part, but again, I'm just for giving the people the opportunity and giving them the chance to make something, and it's going to work for some people, and for others it isn't. And you know, for those that don't, then we'll move on to something else, and for those that do, we'll just build on it.
Okay, let's go to David in New York. David, what's happening?
Hey, well, I guess the question that I really want to ask Vince is, how can he say that a Mexican or Japanese wrestler will never get over in the U.S. if right now in ECW that Super Crazy, Yoshihiro Tajiri, and Masato Tanaka are just as over as anyone else in ECW?
Yeah, but you're talking about being over in a company that's very small. I'm talking about being over on a national scale.
But I was going to add to that, and then just, I guess it was about 2 years ago in WCW, that Ultimo Dragon was just about as over as anyone else in the company.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know about that, but I do think that there was a period where Rey Mysterio Jr., when he first came in the first 6 months, I noticed that he meant, you know, he was one of the biggest ratings draws in the company when he first came in. But I don't know, because Dragon never was good with ratings. I mean, I have to say that, and Ultimo Dragon is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
But he did get big pops.
I mean, he was a super worker in the ring, and no one will deny that. But
don't you think the crowd reacted to him? Better than
I think they reacted to him as well as he was positioned, and probably better than I would even say better than he was positioned, because he never really was positioned that strongly. I mean, Juventud Guerrero was the one guy that I thought that the guys in WCW, this is like a year ago, that the crowd reacted to much bigger than they were ever given the push was Chris Benoit and Juventud Guerrero. Those you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay, go ahead. Anyway.
And also, but I was wondering if you ever think that you come across as racist in your promos, like by saying that Jushin Liger's only good at washing a car, or by booking Juventud to use a bottle of tequila, or the pinata match, or... You get where I'm going with this? I mean, don't you think you come across like a racist?
Well, not necessarily, because I'm just playing the role of a character, and I'm playing the role of a character that, you know, literally, you know, as you can tell by the voice, is off of the streets of New York.
Yeah, but you still booked Juventud Carrera to use a bottle of tequila.
Okay, and?
My point, don't you think that's stereotypical?
No, not at all. Why is that
well, go ahead.
You don't think it's stereotypical for a Mexican wrestler to use a bottle of tequila as a weapon?
No, because the reason why he used a bottle of tequila, if you watched the show a few weeks ago, was because he gave me a bottle of tequila as a gift.
Yeah, but why would he still have a bottle of tequila in his jacket?
What was that?
Why would he still have a bottle of tequila with him?
Well, but that's what gave me the idea of how he could beat Liger, because a week earlier he had given me a bottle of tequila. See, it's a story, and it goes from 1 week to the next. We didn't just pull a bottle of tequila. You know, okay, he's a Mexican, so he's going to hit him with a bottle of tequila. The bottle of tequila came into play because a week earlier he had given me a bottle of tequila as a gift.
Okay, then what about the pinata match?
What about the pinata match? It was just it was a way to do a gimmick match that made sense.
But you booked Mexican wrestlers to use in a pinata match. Don't.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, as far as
it's
racist.
Offensive.
What?
It's offensive.
It's offensive to who?
To a lot of people.
Well, I apologize if you think it's offensive. I don't think it's offensive. Because, first of all, it's a story, and it's make-believe. And you have a guy booking a company from New York City, and yes, does he view people in certain ways? Of course he does, because it's where he was raised and it's what he knows. It's a story. It's make-believe. If
But you're
Vince
still
Russo
booking
was
it.
racist, then there would be no Mexican wrestlers and no Japanese wrestlers on television. We wouldn't be trying to develop roles for these people. It's a story that we're telling.
Okay. Let's head. Do we have any callers on the bank right now? Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's go to Brent in Seattle.
Yes. Hi, Vince.
Hi.
Back when Ted Turner first started the Superstation, he decided that he would do counter programming, and so if they had the news on the local affiliates for ABC, NBC, and CBS, he would have on Andy Griffith. During the Super Bowl, he still has Andy Griffith all day. That's his philosophy, and so the WCW, regardless of what a good job you're doing and whether your program is superior to the WWF or not, is not getting as good of ratings. You're not even close. And so the WWF doesn't have anyone that has a very good work rate, really, or at least they don't use them. Work rate is not important to Vince McMahon. Why doesn't WCW consider having long matches and emphasizing a good work rate? Because they have the workers like that.
Because unfortunately, and again, I've been looking at the ratings for the last 6 years now because that's been my job. And unfortunately, if you want to bring in a mass audience and draw a huge rating, that it's not just the wrestling match. That's not what they want. And that's why, the ratings history over the years, that's why you've seen it go from back and forth and back and forth. The WWF, when I started there, the rating was at a 1.7. And the reason the rating was at a 1.7 is because it was 1996. And they were booking the show. You had Pritchard and Patterson still in there booking the show, and they were booking the show like it was 1980. Nobody cared anymore, and they were losing. Vince was close to bankruptcy. When he brought me in and I started writing television with him, and the fans obviously, they grew up and they evolved, but the product hadn't. And I think, and that's what happened when I was over at the WWF. It wasn't about, it wasn't just about wrestling. It was the storylines and the controversy and the cutting edge. And I mean, you saw the ratings, go through the roof, while the ratings at WCW that had 2 and 3 segment wrestling matches, they were going down the toilet. And again, it's not about what Vince Russo wants. It's about what the people want. And obviously, again, if you want to capture the masses, the casual fan, you have to go beyond the wrestling ring to do that.
Okay, well, there's an old saying that you can't make chicken salad out of chicken. Well, anyway, I can't say that on the air.
That's not true. Because
actually, you can say anything you want on this show.
Or Patterson and Pritchard were booking that stuff when they were drawing a 1.7. They didn't have anything to work with. Vince McMahon didn't have any good workers for them, and so no matter whether they use them for that or
when I started writing television for the WWF, Stone Cold Steve Austin was the ringmaster, and The Rock was Rocky Maivia. They were there. They were on the roster. They didn't know what to do with them. So he did have the talent, but he had, T.L. Hopper and the Goon and Who, and they were doing 80s characters in a 1996 world. The talent was on the roster. They just weren't tapping it at the time.
I suppose I'm thinking further back then, but yeah, I see the point. They did have some talent, but they didn't have nearly as much as WCW does now. Dave, you'll have to back me up on this, but wasn't WCW or NWA's heyday back when they had Flair and Funk and Flair and Steamboat?
You're talking 1989 period now?
Yes.
Okay, 1989. Yeah. What about it? You mean like as far as...
Was that a period that had good pay-per-view buy rates, that had good house show attendance, because that was most important back then?
Okay, in '89, the house show attendance was, you got to remember that was a company that didn't really know what it was doing, and it was coming off of a period where they had really self-destructed in '87 and '88, and their house show attendance was pretty much struggling. As I recall, by early 90, they were getting some real good TV ratings. 89 were okay to good, but TV ratings weren't as important. And the buy rates were so-so. I mean, you can't compare 89 buy rates with 99 buy rates because all of the buy rates in 89 were way bigger than 99 just because pay-per-view was something new. It's a different era. But, I mean, if you're going to look at, Ric Flair and Terry Funk did a 1.5 buy rate in 1989, that looks like it's, that would be like, except for WrestleMania, nothing's going to do that this year, right? So, it looks good today, but it's different. It's different, but it did, those wrestling matches in those eras, they did good TV ratings, and by early 90, WCW was doing some really good TV ratings, and then they self-destructed in 90 again, as they had done so many times over the last decade.
It's interesting, too, for that last caller, and I mean, I think this is really it in black and white. The week before this past Monday, we had really cut the gap to the closest it's been in a long time. I mean, I think the rating was they did a 5.5, we did a 3.3. So it was down to 2.2, which at one point it was averaging out over 4. This past Monday, okay, where we had Nash and Goldberg, up and down. I mean, we had a pay-per-view card, okay? It was up against a wedding. The whole show on Raw was based around a wedding. They went from a 5.5 to a 6.5. The whole show was based on a wedding. So, I mean, that is telling you right there what the people want. And a lot of times, people get hot at me, the wrestling purists that, want a good match and want long wrestling matches. But again, it's not me. I'm getting paid based on a rating, and it is my job to do a rating. So therefore, I have to try to give everybody what they want.
Okay, let's go to John in Atlanta first.
Hey,
John,
guys.
what's going on?
Not much. You're right on the. I'm a 20-year fan, Vince, and you're right on the storyline. So you're not alone out there. Not all our 20-year fans out here think it's just wrestling and nothing about story. I wanted to urge you.
It's both. It's both.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But
Dave, I got to agree. I mean, I have to tell you that there's no doubt in my mind that it's both, because one thing that I've seen, and I just want to add this is, in my opinion, I mean, I'm writing the best storylines I can. The fans might not think they're the best storylines, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I'm writing the best stories that I think I can. But, when you put that story out in the ring, the guys need to go. Mm-hmm. And, there's a difference between the WWF when I was there and the WCW, and I think at the WCW there was a while there where guys were getting paid big contracts, big money, and going through the motions. And right now, we are working very, very hard of changing that at WCW and lighting a fire under these guys, because, again, you're right, it is both, because you need to write the story, but when they get in the ring, they need to go, or else nothing's going to work.
Yep. I wish to urge you, I don't know if you're obviously not the only decision maker there, but to urge you to do the disclaimers on the wrestling. Don't try this at home. More than just WWF doing it, because I read in the newsletter that another kid died by some wrestling moves. It's just needless. So I'd urge that WCW also do that, especially since their wrestling displays a more risky style.
No, that's a real good idea, and I will bring that up if it hasn't been brought up already.
Now there's two things I wanted to get your input on. One, I was hoping you were thinking about using Arn Anderson to manage or be a mouthpiece for Chris Benoit, because he's a great talker, Arn Anderson is. And two, if Shawn Michaels was available, would you go for him?
Well, we are going to use Arn Anderson. I think you've seen the last couple of weeks. There is, he's definitely being worked in. I don't think we're going to tie him up with Chris Benoit, but he will have an important and big role, and a lot of that will be talking, because unfortunately Arn can't do too much physically anymore. If Shawn Michaels were available, I'd pick him up in a heartbeat.
Yeah, okay. And keep up the good work, and I know that it's going to even get better as the guys get used to reading such long scripts and such like that too. Just time will, the tide will turn, I believe.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, Vince. One of the things that I'm always interested in everyone is, what type of how much contact are you having right now as far as with WWF talent? And is there interest in guys when their contract is up to come over? And are there a lot of guys you're interested in, or are you pretty much interested in just making the most of this roster? And
no, I'm interested in making the most of this roster. I mean, there's no question about that, but I'd be lying to you if I told you I wasn't interested in some of the guys at the WWF. And I mean, on a weekly basis, I still talk to a lot of the guys at the WWF. I mean, a lot of them were friends, and, unfortunately, when and this is how this business is, when I left the WWF, when it came to office, I mean, I became the Antichrist. But as far as talent, they're a little bit more human about it, so I've been able to really maintain those contacts because, a lot of those guys are my friends.
Now, do you think it's conceivable that over the course of, say, the year 2000, that you're going to be able to lure several guys over if their contracts are up? Or
I think there's no question about that, because I have to tell you something, and again, Dave, I want you and everybody to understand, I'm not by any means taking shots at WWF. I just worked at that system for so long that, I know how it is, and I knew what was going to happen when I left. And, basically working under Vince, and, when we worked together, Vince's focus was always on the top guys. I mean, the top 5 guys. Vince's first question every week was, what's Austin doing? I mean, he always used to focus on those top 5 guys. And, when I left, it hurt me because, our focus, of course, was on the top guys because that's where your money is. But the underneath guys, that's where your future is. And, Ed Ferraro and myself, I mean, we put a lot of time into, the Bob Hollies and the D'Lo Browns and the Edges and the Christians and the Hardys. And, that's the talent that we really tried to develop because we knew that was the future. And, I knew that when I left the WWF, the focus on that middle-of-the-road talent was not going to be there anymore because, as I said, it wasn't Vince's priority. So I think when contracts are up, those guys in the middle with all the talent in the world that knew how closely Ed and myself worked with them, I think there's going to be some interest of bringing some of those guys over to WCW.
Are there guys in let's go like a year from today. Who in WCW do you think are going to be elevated to the top tier level?
Well, I think right now you're in the process of Chris Benoit and Jeff Jarrett getting there real quick. And, that's what we've been doing. And again, Dave, a lot of your callers, and I know you as well, you talk about workers. I agree with you. And as I said, that there's still a lot of people in WCW that are making a lot of money. We're not doing anything work-wise for a long time. So the idea is to get Jarrett, get Benoit in that upper level, let them work with these guys, let them light fires under these guys, because if these guys now don't come up to their level, well, then they're going to make that talent look bad. So, that's why those 2 guys were chosen to really bring up quickly based on the work rate. But there's a lot of guys. I mean, Billy Kidman, I think he's a great star. Again, I think he needs to really work on his mic skills and his personalities, but there's so much he can do. When Rey Mysterio gets healthy again, I mean, he's another star, and I mean, Eddie Guerrero too, he's having a lot of physical problems, but, he's another one. I see a guy that we really haven't done anything with, Lash LaRue, and when that guy talks, and even if he's cutting a 20, 30-second promo, I mean, just the flow and the personality and the charisma is there. And, there are a lot of guys that I think are really going to rise to the top over the next year.
Are you able to do anything with Lenny Lane?
I'm still working on that. As a matter of fact, we were talking about Lenny and Lodi today, because ever since I came on the job, I kind of inherited that problem. And, basically the company here, was taking a stand saying, bluntly, period, we would never see Lenny and Lodi on TV again. So me not even knowing them personally, I was like, well, wait a minute, you're going to make two guys that do this for a living and that love this business and built their whole careers on the wrestling business. They're not going to work again in this company because of an angle that they were put in. I mean, that just didn't make any sense for me. So it's almost been like a personal fight on my own for Lenny and Lodi, because those guys deserve to have a role in this company. And I think before all is said and done, hopefully by the first of the year, they will.
What about Randy Savage? What kind of, I mean, is he going to be kept? Are the negotiations still going on, or is it just kind of, because he kind of is, I don't know, he did that one interview and then we haven't seen him since.
Well, yeah, what happened was Randy did the one interview because Randy came in and I got together with him at Halloween Havoc. And, I knew Randy at the WWF. And, we talked about a story idea that we were both really hot for, and he really liked it, and I thought it would work, and it was really special for Randy. But then they got down to dollars and cents, and that's kind of where I bow out. I try not to get involved. And, the two parties were very far apart in money. And, unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be able to get close together. So that's kind of where it is right now.
Okay, let's go to Bob in California. Bob, you're up next.
Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, you got a great buzz on the phone today. Yeah, Vince, what kind of pressure are you getting from standards and practices right now? Because I'm asking this in relation to Vampira's match on the pay-per-view, where he was expected to go crazy and cut his head open from ear to ear, and all of a sudden it turned into the biggest cluster after you.
Well, I'll be totally honest with you. That right now, there's a lot of pressure from standards and practices, and the reason there is, quite frankly, is because it's nothing we've done. It's the sponsors pulling out of the WWF. And, of course, the sponsors are right there threatening, well, WCW, if you come close to this, we're going to pull you too. Like I said, and, whether people want to believe me or not, that's up to them. We don't need to do what we did at the WWF because we have the talent roster to tell entertaining stories. We don't need to do shock TV. But I think what's happening is that standards and practices right now, today, is really going too far the other way. And, to me, they're having problems with some things that, in my opinion, are totally ridiculous. And, I mean, things that I wouldn't even think twice about. But I think once the controversy with the WWF blows over, I think we can get back to business as usual.
Well, I was under the impression that when you signed, you thought you had a freer hand than you did.
Well, like I said to you, I did have that free hand until the situation started with Coca-Cola and sponsors dropping the WWF. I think WCW and, not even WCW, I think standards and practices, right now, to be honest with you, I think they're in a panic mode. So everything we do, they are looking at through the microscope, and I can understand that. And like I said, it's things that are not even controversial; they're more ridiculous. But again, as this thing blows over, I think so will the issue with standards and practices.
Well, then what
happened? Is there like one thing like that you could point to that was just like over the edge as far as like you had something that you thought was like you probably didn't give a second thought to that they've nixed like lately?
Oh, I can tell you numerous things. I mean, one of them being I don't know if you noticed, but I believe it was this past Monday. Piper drives up to the building in a limo, okay, and these two, especially one, Rhonda Singh, an overweight woman gets out of a car next to him. Piper, being Piper, would have made a derogatory statement towards that woman. He wasn't in a good mood to begin with. We made him come to the building to referee. He didn't want to be there. He didn't want to referee. He sees this woman getting out of the car next to him. She shoots him a look. He would have made a derogatory comment her way. Well, Roddy couldn't make a derogatory comment to a heavyset woman because out there in the world, we might have offended a heavyset woman.
Are you getting the same pressure now because of Ferrara's impersonation of Rod?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
well,
I mean,
then how
and again,
long? Let me ask you then: how long do you think you can put up with this? I mean, it's really oppressive because it's making the storylines read like third-grade plays because you can't get any kind of an edge because Ted Turner has somehow, reinvented morals. I mean, how far can you go before you got to go, this isn't going to work?
Well, I mean, and again, if I get to that point, that's what I will say. Because, I'm a person, and, people can say whatever they want about Vince Russo, and, yeah, I came here for the money, and this, that, and the other, everything else. Well, that has nothing to do with it. I mean, I am the type of person that I have a lot of pride, and I need to put out there the best product that I can because, quite frankly, I want to win. That's the kind of person I am. I want to beat the WWF in the ratings. That's what they paid me for.
But now they've got these handcuffs on you.
Exactly, and that's why I'm saying if it ever got to the point that I was like, look, you're not letting me do my job. I'm doing everything I can do. If you don't help me, this is not going to work. Well, if it ever got to that point, then I would probably just say thank you very much and leave.
Okay, well, then I just specifically, what happened in the pay-per-view match with Vampiro?
Well, what are you talking about now?
Well, he was planning to go crazy. I mean, it was well known that he was going to do one of his classic bloodbath.
Yeah, well, again, that really wasn't a standards and practice issue, to be honest with you. What had happened was the pay-per-view at Havoc, okay, the one before that. We had gone to Brad Siegel. We explained to him how important it was for Sid to get juice in that match. We were telling a story that was going to continue on for the next 3 months. Brad Siegel, he understood that. He knew we weren't getting juice for the sake of getting juice. He knew we were telling a story, so he gave us the green light, and we did that. Unfortunately, the following match, which was Flair and Page, Flair went into business for himself. And, you had blood on top of blood on top of blood. So, therefore, when we got to make, we really made the decision, look, because of Flair last month and because we really went over the top, it was probably a smart thing to stay away from that at the Mayhem pay-per-view. So we weren't told, no juice, I mean, we weren't told that. We just figured that, knowing what we're dealing with, it was probably in our best interest to stay away from it.
Really quickly, I just want to give you the results of the poll. Do you think last night's toning down of the language and sexual content on WF SmackDown made the show better, or more entertaining, less entertaining, or no difference at all? To you, more entertaining 17%, less entertaining 15%. It made no difference 68%. So I guess this basically, pretty overwhelmingly actually, says that the toning down of SmackDown did not hurt the show, and I would agree with that. I thought that the show was an entertaining show, and I thought that the fact that the women were wearing slightly more clothes and that there was a little bit less swearing, I didn't hurt my enjoyment of the show one bit. Let's go to we'll go to John in Maryland. John, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing, guys? I had a question for you, Vince. LaParca's angle. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah, LaParca's angle where where they had someone speaking for him. Whatever happened to that?
We're still doing it. He just hasn't spoken since.
Where's this going to lead eventually? Is this going to happen for other workers that can't speak English?
No. It was just something we did that was a little unique for Kaz and LaParca. No, it was we just kind of gave it to them. But that storyline will continue. As a matter of fact, on Nitro this week, we kind of find a spot for LaParca. So,
really?
Again, we're just trying to play everybody in.
Right. And what's your thoughts on D'Lo Brown?
I love I would grab D'Lo in a heartbeat.
And because I did hear that there's some truth to that rumor that's been going around everywhere.
Yeah, again, D'Lo was one of those guys,